Today we're going to talk about the role of standardized tests in college admissions. We're going to discuss three different types of tests: the ACT, the SAT, and subject tests, which are also referred to as SAT-2s. All of these tests are usually taken during the junior and senior year of high school. It's important to know that each college has its own policies regarding testing, and they may use the test scores differently. So it's important that students look up the admissions policies for each of the schools that they're applying to. So let's start by talking about what's on the test. It covers ELA, so that's grammar, writing skills, vocab, and reading comprehension, as well as math, arithmetic, geometry, algebra, functions, and other concepts. The scoring differs between the ACT and the SAT. The ACT is scored on a 36-point scale and has 4 sections: English, math, reading, and science, and an optional essay that is scored between 2 to 12 points. The SAT is scored on a 1,600-point scale and has 2 main sections: English and math, both 800 apiece, with an optional essay scored 2 through 8 points. I want to talk about superscoring for a minute. So superscoring is when students are able to take multiple tests and then use the highest section score from different administrations. So for example, a student could take a test on the ACT and get a 32 the first time and a 33 the second time, and maybe their English was higher on the first test and their math was higher on the second test, and so they take all of the sections and combine them to make a better score. Not all schools will allow for superscoring. You can see some examples of the schools that do allow for superscoring below. Some schools will allow to superscore one of the tests, but not the other. For example, Georgetown allows students to submit SAT scores and superscore the SAT, but not the ACT. Finally, some schools will only consider the highest single administration, meaning the highest score from a day that you test, just that one test. And so some examples are below. Some schools are test flexible. This allows students to submit a variety of standardized test scores to support their application. It doesn't have to be the SAT or the ACT in this case. Sometimes schools will allow students to submit 3 different subject tests or even AP scores. Here are some of the examples of schools that have test flexible policies. Finally, there's test optional. Test optional allows the student to decide whether they want their ACT or SAT scores included in their application or not. It does not hurt the student if they do not submit scores. The schools will then just look at their grades and other factors like essays, recommendation letters, extracurricular activities. Here are some examples of schools that are test optional. Then there's test blind. Test blind means they will not look at your test scores at all. Even if you submit them, they will not consider them as part of the application process. There's only a few schools out there that are test blind, and they're listed below. So let's look at some of the differences between the ACT and the SAT. The ACT is 2 hours and 55 minutes. Students do not get a penalty for guessing, and there's always 4 answer choices with the exception of math, which has 5. The SAT is 3 hours. There again is no guessing penalty, and there's 4 answer choices, although some of the math questions will have student-produced response questions. The ACT has 4 different sections: English, math, reading, and science. And you can see the breakdown of the length for each of the sections listed. The SAT has 2 main sections: evidence-based reading and writing. So there's a reading section and a writing section. The reading section is 65 minutes and the writing is 35. And there's a math section that has 2 different parts: a non-calculator section and a calculator section. This is the timing for each of the questions in seconds. So you can see that the ACT is a little bit faster than the SAT. So how do students choose which test to take? There's a couple different things that students should consider. First, the ACT is faster paced, but many of the questions are a little less in-depth. It does require more math content, and it's often better for faster readers. For the SAT, you have more time per question, but the individual questions often require a little bit more thought, including the math questions. It's often better for slower readers who might be flustered by how quickly the ACT moves. Now let's talk about SAT subject tests or SAT-2s. SAT subject tests are offered in a variety of subjects. They're always an hour long and given on the same day as the SAT. Students are allowed to register for 3 tests per administration. It's important to note that some schools recommend them or even require them, but most do not. It's important for students to check the requirements of individual schools that they're applying to. Here are some examples of the variations of percentiles for each of the different subject tests. For students to be considered competitive, they will want to look up the average test scores at the schools that they are applying to. That's all I have for you today. Thanks so much.